Hey guys, Danny Henson here, and this is my fourth time doing this, trying this, so hopefully this time it actually works. So, today I'll be talking about Darth Bane Rule of Two, the second book in the Darth Bane trilogy. So, first and foremost, what are my overall thoughts on the book? Well, that's complicated. So let's get started. So, first things first, the first third of this book are pretty much just wrapping up the few remaining things from the last book. Just bringing some closure to the Battle of Ruusan and setting up the Ruusan Reformation, which, for those who don't know, is meant to explain or give more context as to why Palpatine says, "I will not let this republic, which has stood for 1,000 years." And we actually get to see the scene between Bane, Zana, and David where she, blows up his hand. So it was nice getting to see that. And plus we see Zana just still being an absolute badass here, murdering an entire family. So yeah, we get the last few bits from Jedi vs. Sith in this first third. It works. And then the rest of the novel is its own, and also we get to see the, Karpyshyn's adaptation of the Bane of the Sith short story within the first third. And this is Karpyshyn we're talking about, so of course it's not going to be, not good in terms of continuity with a previous work. I mean, the crux is there. Bane going to Onderon to get a Sith holocron, and seeing the ghost of Cortus. But in, Rule of Two, it's a bit different. When I say ghost, it's just in his mind. He also sees the ghost of Khan, and the short story also made a point to say that Bane is, after getting the holocron, is going to find an apprentice. Now, while the short story did come out before Jedi vs. Sith, it does take place after. Now, there is a way you can explain it, like maybe Zana's dead, or maybe something happened that makes Bane think she's dead. You can't explain it, but of course, this is Karpyshyn we're talking about. He doesn't care about actually rectifying stuff like that. He cares about tearing the continuity apart just to appease his own story. But in this one, we don't have the ego-flating that was the bountiful references to Revan and KOTOR. I'd say Naga Sadow is the Sith Lord that's most referenced in this book. For those who don't know, that's a Tales of the Jedi character. So, what story does this tell? Well, it's the logical continuation of Path of Destruction. We see Zana training. We get a 10-year time jump. Zana at this point, has fully embraced the dark side and is still training under Bane. And while this is going on, Bane has an obelisk stuck to him that's slowly killing him. It's covered most of his body. And, well, it's kind of making him lose his focus. And he's also trying to find the method in creating, building, or constructing a holocron. And when it comes to the Bane and Zana stuff, they are split up for like most of the book, which is unfortunate, and I feel like that's something that Star Wars has a problem with. Going back to The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, looking at Episode 8 for the sequel trilogy cast. Breaking up the characters, especially when they have a good and interesting dynamic going on, an entertaining dynamic too, is a really bad idea, especially since this is a story. One of the few stories where the main characters are a Sith Master and a Sith Apprentice. Seeing stuff from other parts of the galaxy are interesting. I'm a sucker for world building like that. It's one of the reasons why the prequel trilogy is my favorite, my favorite Star Wars film trilogy. Now, so if they were together more, it wouldn't be a problem, but the issue is they're separated from most of it. And we do get to see bits of her training, but that's not the focus. Now, of course, this is the Darth Bane trilogy, so obviously, yeah, the focus should be on Bane, but Zana, this is called Rule of Two. She's on the cover. And yes, she is a focus. They should have just been together more. I think would have helped out a lot. Luckily, when they're the focus, the book is really interesting. Now Daravit, he's back too. For those who watched my Jedi vs. Sith review, or the State of Star Wars podcast I was on, shameless plug there, know that for the most part, or for most of the comic, I found him to be obnoxiously annoying. Until the end. When he's seen the error of his ways, and, when he gets his hand blown off. Felt the character had some really interesting potential moving forward. I was really excited, I guess, to see where his character would go. So, what did they do with him in Rule of Two? Well, things start off pretty well. He's still on Ruusan. He's become a healer, but keeps to himself. And we also see the effects of, the war between the Jedi and Sith, but also the effects of the Thought Bomb. The planet has gone through significant changes. It snows on the planet now when it didn't before, so creatures are dying, the planet and people are forced to adapt. This book does do a good job at showing just the horror, the effects of war have on the people in terms of, psychological stuff, and the environment too. So yes, starts off pretty well. The problem stemmed from when he finally meets up with Zana again. After all these years, after 10 years. Now he has it in his mind that the reason she blew up his hand is because she was saving him. Because for those who remember from the Jedi vs. Sith comic, or if you read this, Bane was reaching for his lightsaber ready to fight, because, Darth had his lightsaber out and was ready to fight for Zana. So she blows up his hand and saves him, because he would have been dead at the hands of Bane. And he has it in his mind that it's all Bane's fault for why she embraced the dark side the way she did. Now, of course, we know the reason why she embraced the dark side. Law died. No. He was murdered. He or she. Law was murdered by the Jedi. So yeah, it's easy to see why. But so when he meets up with her again, or runs into her again, he non-stop tries to convince her that, oh, this isn't you. Give up the dark side. This isn't you. Give up the dark side. That's his character for the rest of the book. Just trying to convince Zana that she's not really a Sith, and it makes sense with the character. It really does. The issue is that it's annoying for one, and two, it doesn't offer an interesting alternative. Why would we want to see Zana go back to the light side? One, we know that it's not going to happen. Putting aside the fact that we know, Dynasty of Evil, but the character we've seen the character we've seen her in action. She's embraced the dark side. She wants the dark side. She has no reason to go back to the light. And plus, it's just far more interesting to see this Sith. Like, this is what the Sith for the next 1,000 years are built upon. The foundation of what will eventually lead to the downfall of the Republic. Why would I want to see her go to the light? Now, yeah, sure, there are interesting things you can do with that, but not as interesting as this. Like, Zana, even going back to Jedi vs. Sith, was, like, really, really interesting. Especially when she embraced the dark side. Now, there is an argument to me made that, oh, she could be a character that's struggling. She wants to embrace the dark side, but feels the pull of the light. No. No. No, no, no. And then, he dies at the end. Same as Farfalla, if you remember him. From the first book in Jedi vs. Sith. Basically, this book also serves as a sequel to Jedi vs. Sith too, not just Path of Destruction. Like, or I should say, this serves as a part 2 to Path of Destruction, more so than a second book. Because this continues off the plot points and characters from that first book and wraps everything up. Well, and also Jedi vs. Sith with Darth in mind. Like, this wraps up everything. Like, everyone's character arcs, well, and most of their life, like Farfalla, Darth, and Caleb die by the end of the book. And also by the end of the book, the Jedi are now fully sure that the Sith are gone. Forever. And Zana makes the vow that, well, once she's learned everything she can out of Bane, she'll kill him. Which has been Bane's mindset for a while now. So, Dynasty of Evil is going to be interesting because it's, as of now, before reading it, it feels like it's going to be its own thing. And yes, we still need to see Zana kill Bane and become the next Sith Lord. But in terms of, like, the Battle of Ruusan, the Brotherhood of Evil, the characters that came out of Path of Destruction, Jedi vs. Sith are gone, or their storylines and character arcs have been wrapped up. That should be interesting. At least by that point, Carbon Chin will have nothing else to adapt and then destroy the continuity for. Hopefully. Hopefully. And yes, this book does continue the continuity fuck ups of Path of Destruction. Less so, because it's not adapting a 6-issue comic, more so the last issue of the comic and the Bane and the Sith short story. And it retroactively also destroys continuity, like when Darth meets up or runs into Zana after 10 years, he makes a note that she looks different, remembering back to when she had Jedi robes on during Rusan. Even though in the comic, her, Darth, and Hardin were all wearing their civilian clothes. And of course, what also makes it aggravating is that, well, that just further confirms the fact, reinforces the fact that Zana is retroactively no longer barefoot as a kid. That was like one of the few remaining things I had, and Carbon Sheen decided to take that away. Thanks, asshole. At least I'll have Tahiri Vila. Of course, that's not the biggest deal, but it's the cherry on top of an aggravating journey through the... I just don't like Carbon Sheen. The disregarding of continuity. Am I the only one who actually cares? I mean, yeah, I know some State of Star Wars. I know some State of Star Wars guys also not a fan of the continuity fuck-ups, but I don't think they're as angry about it as I am. I'm of the opinion that when it comes to a large canon like the Star Wars EU, I prefer having continuity over the individual stories. I mean, yes, the individual stories being good is very important, but if we have a disregard for continuity, then why the hell should I care about going through any of it? Or looking at it as a singular universe if the continuity is non-existent? This isn't Star Trek where, continuity, or the Star Trek books, comics, and video games where the continuity with the primary stuff, the shows and movies, aren't the best. I mean, if you're looking for a large universe where they care more about the individual stories and the overall continuity, go to the Star Trek books and comics. Because like I said, if without a tight continuity, then why the hell should I care about anything that goes on in this universe, or looking at it as a singular universe? The book is well written, just like Path of Destruction. Maybe less so because it is a smaller scale story, so the focus is far more on a handful of characters rather than the large setting of the Battle of Rusan. So, the stuff with Darth is really, really annoying, and it just adds on to how annoying it is. Carbon Sheen, you had a character that had a lot of potential, and you decided to just make him a one-note character, and by the time he died, I felt nothing. Thanks for that, and, Sana no longer being barefoot, Star Wars barely has any of those characters, and you decide to take that away too. I know a lot of people praise this trilogy, and in some ways, I can see why. But with these first two books having a total disregard for canon, I hate these first two books. I can go back and read them because they are well written, but I will never get it out of my mind that these two books didn't care about the greater, well, okay, on the two Bane stories that preceded this trilogy, because it does have nice connections to other works, the Tales of the Jedi comics, for instance. Several Sith Lords from those comics are referenced. And KOTOR to an extent, but I just saw that as Carbon really stroking his own ego there. Like, oh, look, a creation of George Lucas was heavily, 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 heavily inspired by my creation. That wouldn't be the issue, it's just the amount of times the events of KOTOR were referenced. So now the question is, which do I prefer, the first book or this book? I'd have to say the first book, because even though that had far more issues when it came to the continuity fuck-ups, I was far more invested in that one. When it comes to Star Wars, I like the large-scale stories more so than the smaller-scale ones. And, the Battle of Ruusan, and, the destruction of the Brotherhood of Darkness, the foundation for the Rule of Two. If this book had a much bigger focus on Bane and Zana together, I would have liked this book more, but no, they were split apart. They're split up for most of the book, and then Darth also just drags it down. You have no reason to read the Bane of the Sith short story. It offers nothing. When it comes to Jedi vs. Sith, yes, even though the continuity is destroyed thanks to the first two books of the Bane trilogy, there are elements that you need in order to really not understand, but get the impact for. Like, Hardin is mentioned, but we never see him. So, in order to know what his character was and what he really meant to Darth, you have to read Jedi vs. Sith. But again, thanks to these first two books, I don't know what exactly from that comic is still intact. Because, in Jedi vs. Sith, we saw Farfalla was a satyr, or whatever the satyr equivalent in the Star Wars universe is, and his messenger was a harpy. But in the first book, and even in the first book, the messenger and Farfalla are never described. And even in this book, Farfalla is never described, really. I mean, okay, in terms of his legs. In terms of the rest of him, it's clear that he's at least looks human. But when it comes to every other alien species, they are described, like the four throats of a... Forgetting the species name, damn it. But the Laku of a Twi'lek, or the red eyes of a Chiss, stuff like that. But when it comes to Farfalla, he's never described. So is he a human? Because that takes a conscious effort not to describe him, because when it comes to Star Wars, it can be assumed, and I think rightfully so, that if you don't describe what a character looks like in terms of the more alien features, then they're just human. His messenger was a harpy, but again, she wasn't described. Her appearance wasn't described in Path of Destruction. But the pirate, the treasure planet-looking ship, Farfalla's ship, it's described the same way in this book as it appeared in Jedi vs. Sith. So you keep that really stupid design, but not what the characters were wearing, not anything. Carbon Sheen is annoying. I hate him. He has royally pissed me off. One more book to go. I'm sure I'll like it more than these first two, because at least that, as far as I'm aware, because that will be its own thing, not adapting anything, as far as I'm aware. We'll see, though. So what did you all think? Do you all not care about the fact that these first two books destroyed continuity? Do you care more about each individual story being its own thing rather than, being a part of a universe it's supposedly a part of? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, this is Captain Henson, signing off.